Thank you so much, Sister Ranjan and Lena, for your beautiful introductions.
Absolutely. Brother Charlie, as Lena and Ranjan have said, it really is always such a pleasure to spend time in your company as a yogi soul, as one who has spent nearly half a century journeying with these ideas of the Brahma Kumaris, and in particular this aspect of purity, which this whole series is dedicated to exploring. And I think possibly for some people watching today, purity isn't perhaps something that they have given much thought to up until now. We often hear about qualities such as kindness, compassion, cooperation, but really purity isn't at the forefront of most people's thinking in terms of a spiritual path and a quality to cultivate. Why for you is an understanding and a practice and a deep experience of purity so important?
Well, thank you once again, Philippa. It's so lovely to be with you. And I feel for someone on a spiritual journey, purity becomes an essential requirement, because to me, purity is like the fragrance of being when all aspects of my life are based on truth. And it's, we know in the world where there's a physical purity, which is something which is untainted or not contaminated. There's a moral purity, when someone sort of follows as an innocence or follows a morality. But a spiritual purity to me is really when I embed my thinking and my feeling in truth. And when I do that, the fragrance which really emerges for me is like a cleanliness of mind, a lightness of mind, and a cleanliness of attitude. And it's like a choice that I choose to create a high quality in thought and in feeling, because that's the foundation of a state of well-being. My own experience is, if I can use the language, the clearer my thinking is, I feel automatic state of peace and joy inside.
That's a beautiful description. And you have, as I said, been working on this aspect, this quality of the soul, for all of these years. But when we look around us at the world at this time, we really don't see many examples of purity in any walk of life, in any environmental aspect. There just aren't many examples of purity out there. We have fake news, we have false information. It's a world where there are so many ulterior motives mixed into what people are doing. There very often isn't just a pure motivation, it's mixed in with something else. How do we begin to cultivate something like purity when we just don't see any examples of it in front of us?
Yes, it's a fascinating thing, because I often feel what you were just describing, the collective mind of humanity. The image I have, Philippa, is like 7.9 billion human beings pumping out a quality of thought, which is sort of, I don't want to sound too strong, but like contaminating an atmosphere that we all drink in every day. Even if I wake up not feeling that anxious or depressed, it's almost like I drink in the vibes of the world. And for me, you know how often you can have negative thinking, impure thoughts, if I use it that way, and you want to pluck them out. You sort of cherry pick them out of your mind because they make you feel bad. But what spirituality does is, to me, it goes to the absolute seed of the great influence on my thinking. What is the most powerful influence which makes it pure or impure? And the image I have is my inner world is like a tree. And a tree has a seed, a trunk, branches, and leaves. So your thoughts are like the leaves. You know, a huge tree, millions of leaves. And so all these leaves on the top, but the branches are influencing the leaves, the trunk is influencing the branches, the seed is influencing the whole tree. And what I found on my journey is that when the seed of my thinking is false, when my sense of identity, the seed is my sense of who I am. And when that is contaminated, when I think I'm a temporary body and all the labels of my body, it grows a trunk, branches, and too much thinking, overthinking. But when you replace that seed with the truth that I am a spiritual being, a soul, it has an influence on the whole tree, and automatically the thoughts cool down. There's a natural creation of pure thought, if I can say, and pure thought creates a more peaceful quality of thought, and I would say a joyous quality of thought too.
And would you also say a more powerful thought? Because
Absolutely.
I'm wondering what you feel is the potential of pure thinking. What can it actually achieve, not just in your life, but in the world around us?
No, I believe there is nothing more powerful than a pure thought, because a pure thought is like an energy or a feeling that transforms atmospheres. You know, you can speak to someone with all your intellectual beliefs and ideas, but you may not change them. But when you give them a feeling of love or belonging or respect or peace, that moment, even one moment, can change them forever, can give them a feeling. Because actually your pure thoughts are like a perfume or a fragrance that can permeate an atmosphere. And that's why they are so powerful. That's why the atmosphere of the planet is like it is because those 7.9 billion human beings pumping out that low quality of thought. And when some of us try to, on the basis of sowing the seed of self-awareness, create an elevated quality of thought, we can't underestimate the power of that to influence the world. And if I can just say one thing, like I can only sit here in the here and now, in the present. I'm in Sydney and the wonder is you're in London. But your thoughts are beyond time and space. My thought can reach you instantly. That, light travels at 186,000 miles per second, but thought is instant. And Philippa, how you're sitting in London, you get a powerful thought of a friend in Australia or India or America because their thought message has touched you and you've picked it up instantly. This is why I think today humanity has forgotten the greatest power, which is the power of pure thought.
And I guess if you think about it, everything that exists in the world, in the material world, exists because someone had a thought to create it. They had an idea. Every interaction is based on a thought. Everything we do throughout the day is as a result of thoughts that we have had, which make us do what we do, whatever those original thoughts are. So you could say that actually thoughts are the driver for creating the world around us. And so if we can interrupt, like a circuit breaker, that chain of negative, fake, false thinking and replace it with something else, then inevitably you will see that manifesting in the world. But I suppose my question for you in a sense is that people, when they think of this state of being that you're describing, they would say, look, that's great. And I can see that that's a wonderful thing. But that is something for, maybe for someone who is following a monastic path, who is a monk or a nun. Me as just a regular, human going about my daily life, really, who am I to think that cultivating a pure thought or pure thinking is A, attainable, and B, something I should be considering even? why should the ordinary person be even thinking or engaging with you on this concept of cultivating pure thinking?
Well, I think we're all regular human beings. And in the sense that, whether for me, I've been challenged by everything of life. And where does the challenge first hit? My whole world happens in my mind, doesn't it? My whole reality, my relationships, my experiences, my memories, my thoughts, my feelings, they all meet in my mind. And that is like the central part of life. And I think, maybe it can sound a bit too elevated and philosophical, but fundamentally the concept of purity of thought is just really re-educating myself that each time I react to a bad behavior and I have negative thoughts, I am instantly bringing my sense of joy and peace and fulfillment in life down. I have chosen to react to you, and the purity of my thought brings my whole sort of inner world into that dark, ugly, uncomfortable place. But really what I think we learn in spirituality is, yes, things around me will be like this, will be like that. People will behave like this, behave like that. But I learn the art of creating a state of quality of thinking. I realize that I am responsible for every thought. They are my creation. So when I think negative thoughts about something in the world, it's actually me. And I find that when I take full responsibility for my thinking, I think we take a huge step forward in improving the quality of my life, because we all are regular people and we all want to be happier. It's intrinsic in the human spirit to want to feel happier and more peaceful. It's a natural function of our desires.
So it's absolutely within everyone's grasp to achieve this state of being, this state of having thoughts as you're describing. But I'd like to kind of get a little bit more practical with you in a way, because you're saying, I can choose to have a pure thought, as if it's like flicking a switch and it's like, okay, am I going to drink tea or coffee? Like it's something that you can just decide. But what do you do practically to engage and support that process? And, moment by moment, how do you make that choice manifest?
Yeah, I think, as I was beginning to share earlier, I think it's not a matter of just suddenly trying to change a thought. It's actually rebuilding the awareness of who I am. My own experience is that there's, really three personalities within all of us. There's two personalities, I would say, which take my whole sense of identity from my body. And the first personality I call the I of arrogance, or the I of superiority. And this personality compares with others and thinks, I'm better, I know more, I am right. When it comes into my feelings, it's this one that has all that thinking around feeling insulted, disrespected, not valued, hypersensitive. Thoughts that each one of us has felt and does feel in life. The second personality that generates thoughts is, I would say, the I of lack of self-respect, which is the I of inferiority. And when this I is ruling, I compare and I feel, others are better, others don't love me, appreciate me. When it comes into my feelings, that's when I feel unworthy, not good enough, hopeless, depressed, and all that whole genre of feeling, which we all know incredibly well. But the seed of both of them is a false sense of self. And so the beginning point for any one of us, I would say, is just to gently, gently begin to practice, who am I? It's the most powerful influence on the purity of my thoughts and feelings, is my sense of self. And when I begin to practice that, in fact, I'm an eternal soul, a point source of life energy that sits in the front of the brain, and my own experience is, as I began to not just meditate on the soul, but as I began to move about my life, practicing to be a soul and meeting others beyond their labels, I had an amazing experience of, if I can say, an upgrading of the quality of my thinking. It wasn't exponential, it was just gentle, gentle, gentle. And when I would react and have negative thoughts, rather than just allow them to come, I began to ask myself the question, why am I reacting? And I always found it was my ego or lack of self-respect that are programmed to just really, create that negative thinking. And when I took responsibility, I started to change. It wasn't dramatic, but slowly, slowly, I'd say the quality of my thinking improved, if I can put it like that.
No, that's a good way of putting it. In our session, the first session with Sister Genty, we were talking about awareness and a state of being, and that purity is our original state of being. And Sister Genty introduced us to this idea of sanskaras, which we can call the latent tendencies that lie within the soul that create, if you like, thoughts and create reactions and responses to other people and the situations we face. In this conversation, we're talking about thinking, but of course, thinking is all the time arising from these sanskaras, from these latent tendencies that lie within the soul. And so this journey of purification has to involve all those levels of being that sometimes lie at a subconscious level, sometimes at a conscious level. And the habits of impure thinking go very deep within us. And so it's a sort of a root and branch approach. It's not just a superficial change, transformation that you're talking about, but one that really seeps through all the layers of the soul. And I wonder how long you felt it took for you to begin to change your tendencies, your sanskaras, to the point where what naturally arose from deep within was actually something much more beneficent and pure than had been there before.
There's so many layers of change, I think, on the spiritual journey. I would say, a little window of benefit right from the beginning, but that little window just kept opening and opening. And I think, I feel we're at a time where the big struggle is mental health. The big struggle is with all this chronic negative thinking about the self and others and the world. And that struggle is huge for most of us. But when I really begin to practice on a regular basis, so spirituality is not just sort of believing in something or meditating, and then as soon as you stop meditating, your whole mindset just reverts to the old story of reacting and thinking negatively. No, I'm actually taking my meditation into my life in the sense. And really, for me, I can say that the more I sow the seed of who I am in the sort of the fundamental building block of my consciousness, that I'm an eternal, immortal, non-physical being, the soul. That seed influenced the trunk, which I believe is the sanskaras, the subconscious. The subconscious influences my mental and emotional patterns. We have numerous mental and emotional patterns of perfectionism and all these sorts of things. And they're also feeding the thoughts. So you reprogram the seed. It'll affect the subconscious, even the mental, emotional patterns, and even the conscious thinking. But you need patience, patience, and more patience, because you know, we're in a world of quick fix. We want the quick fix, but actually my experience, you know, it's the hare and the tortoise. The tortoise just does that little bit every day, every day. Really, this is my experience. When I began this, you know, my mind was like this, you know, up and down, up and down. And then after a while, it became like that. And I can honestly say from my heart, it feels quite stable now. Even though the world changes externally, it doesn't impinge on my thinking world internally. And it makes life so much easier, but there's no doubt it needs patience, because once you start on the inner journey, you realize how much stuff there is in there that needs to be looked at and changed, but change with a benevolent attitude towards the self.
I wonder as well how much you have to look at the things that your mind is consuming during the day, the media that you are listening to, even conversations that you're having. I had just a throwaway comment that someone made to me yesterday about the fact that I'd left my sunroof open in my car and that if it rained, my car was going to get wet. And in the dream that I've just had from waking now, someone had a hose pipe and there was water coming through my sunroof, and I was able to trace that dream back to that comment. So in other words, what I'm saying is, you know, if we're looking at purity, it has to filter even into the level of our unconscious mind, but also our dream state, that things that happen to us during the day are going to filter all the way through. So how do you take care that you're not exposing the subtle being that is I, the soul, to these impressions that are going to lodge somewhere within me? And conversely, how important has it been for you that you surround yourself with examples that you can find of people who are really practicing what it is you're wanting to become yourself? So it's sort of a two-way process there.
Yeah. You know, Philip, as you were saying that, I think impurity is all about influence. And what happens is the more I lose the strength, you used that beautiful word at the beginning, power of purity, everything affects you. You know, even it's not just people's words, even their facial expressions, their vibrations, their presence can change our mood. Now, the human nature today, we put it back on you. You're the one that's hurt. But actually, that's purely a sign to me I've lost my inner power. I've lost my spiritual strength. That every little nuance of life really makes my mind fluctuate and my feelings and emotions fluctuate. This is really, and this is where when you, I think, begin to meditate and you consciously create those quality thoughts, and there will definitely be scenes of life where you're affected and the old quality negative come back, but you keep practicing and you begin to realize that actually what I read, what I watch, everything goes in and triggers the influences, you know, affecting me. And this is where I am very conscious of what I read, and especially in the contemporary world of a billion opinions about absolutely everything online. Actually, I am consciously, it's not that I avoid it, but I really don't interact with it much, because if you're nurturing a quality mind, you want to get your strength back, you have to be careful of the influences you put yourself under. And that's where I would say one's lifestyle. And yes, you know, we can't avoid people. You know, people come in all shades, but we, you know, if you do have some company which really helps you on your journey, that definitely helps too. Company is an incredibly powerful influence, but in the long run, we want to be with any company and not allow any company to influence me, because it's not them, it's me. That's what I love about spirituality. You take the full responsibility. We stop the blame game, putting it always back on others and things outside of myself. So slowly, slowly, once again, you're designing your life to create a more quality state of thought, purity of thought and feeling.
I'd like to move our conversation on to the second part of our topic, which is pure feelings.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering what for you is the relationship between having pure thoughts and having pure feelings. And you've talked about this degree of control that we can have over choosing the thoughts we have in our mind. But how do you choose what feelings you have? Because your feelings are your feelings. You can't not feel what you're feeling. So how do you introduce this idea of purity in feelings?
You know, purity in feelings is really the great power, I would say. And, you know, just to give an idea of that, perhaps, in a relationship, you and I are talking at the moment. When we talk, we communicate on 3 levels. One is what we say, we're communicating verbally. The other is our faces. You and I are both reading each other's faces at the moment. It's normal. We do it consciously and subconsciously. The third thing is the vibes, the feelings you get from another. Actually, the incredible thing is that the non-verbal, the face and the vibrations account for 90% of the impact in a relationship. So when you get 2 messages, one is what you hear and one is what you feel, you always trust your feelings. This is the incredible power of feelings. And I would say in one way, to me these days, spirituality is the study of keeping your feelings inside very elevated. And in psychology, there's been a debate for years, which comes first, the thought or the feeling? You know, some say it's the feelings, and then out of the feeling, you generate a quality of thought. What is meditation? Meditation is just filling the sacred space of your mind with these elevated feelings. And out of that beautiful space of feelings that are loving and benevolent, imagine the quality of thought generated out of that space. And that's why meditation is really the study of feelings and keeping my feelings elevated once again, regardless of the feelings or the atmosphere around me.
And how do you do that without suppressing feelings that may be going on? Because we said earlier on that, you know, we are all human and we have, you know, feelings that we're perhaps not always proud of about other people or about situations, or you may have feelings about, you know, the state of the world and the fact that the temperature is slowly rising, and you know, we're seeing climate change, and you know, you may have feelings of anger arising and frustration, and you know, those feelings are there. How do you bring very real feelings like that to a place of resolution and purity?
You know, as you said, Philippa, every human being has a whole gamut of feelings of anger, of hurt, of grief, of fear. Gosh, we all know them and we know them really well. But I think rather than sort of focusing on them and analyzing them and why they come, we begin to focus on the original self. And I would say, you know, in a way, these feelings or emotions are the children of a dysfunctional relationship with me. You know, when I have this dysfunctional relationship with myself, it's like when parents have children. If the parents don't have a good relationship, it affects the children. If I don't have a good relationship with me, it will create a whole gamut of emotions. And so the way to sort of go to the seed is to really begin to explore this relationship with me. And I'm not in denial, I'm not suppressing, I'm being honest with myself. How do I treat myself? Most of us are so heavy-handed, so self-critical, even to the point of self-hatred often, this dislike. To me, that's the reason the world is like it is. because this first relationship in life is so damaged, so unhealthy in the majority of human beings. Spirituality is just gently, gently looking at this relationship and understanding how my ego and lack of self-respect have destroyed my relationship with me. And as I start, rather than focusing on that ego, I start to build a relationship with myself as a soul. You can't, to me, that is so intrinsic to the healing process. So that rather than focusing on the myriad of negative emotions I can have, I just go to the seed. Because when I'm in that state of soul consciousness, the byproduct, the seed, it is the seed of love, respect, power, peace, happiness. But when I'm body conscious and I forget the self, it is the seed of a whole gamut of negative emotions: ego, anger, fear, greed, grief, etc., etc. And so it's, once again, no one will promise that there's an overnight transformation. But once I re-establish a relationship with my intrinsic self, my true self, that healing process of those old emotions gently, gently begins to happen.
I love the way you keep bringing it back to the self. Yeah. That yes, there may be a trigger in the world outside. There may be a person who is triggering you, but you take responsibility for what that brings up in you. And the solution is always by looking at yourself and seeing what possibly is an obstacle that you can work with. Would you say that is an absolute fundamental truth? Or are there times when actually the problem is out there? I'm fine, I'm pure, my feelings are benevolent, but these guys over here are the ones who are making me feel this, and actually they are responsible for me feeling this. Is that ever the case?
There is so much happening in our world. There's so much genuine injustice, corruption. But, I have a choice whether I let that really affect me. So it's not that I can't see it. I will be aware of it, but I choose not to generate thoughts that bring me down, so to speak. And perhaps this is another way of describing that. One of the things that I found enormously beneficial on my journey is that I found the more I practice this journey to be a soul, I feel a natural detachment from things. Now, that doesn't mean I'm cutting off, running away, I just feel I don't absorb like I used to. I more observe life than absorb all the stuff. So when I hear an opinion, which I really feel is really inappropriate or whatever, I don't overreact in my mind and generate all the thoughts that mean that I lose my happiness. I can see it, but I sort of observe it. I listen to it, because my huge lesson in life, everyone is different. Everyone is different. And, I love the difference, actually. I enjoy interacting with people who think differently and behave differently from me. And it's fine. They are who they are. And I feel the first law of spirituality says, I am responsible for how I feel. Because what is happening in the culture in the world today is the blame culture. That's not going to change anything. And I love that. That yes, like you said, there's very difficult people sometimes, very rude, but I can choose not to absorb it. And this may sound a little bit too much, but even have benevolent feelings for those who think differently to me. I think I love that challenge. You have every right to think differently to me. Why should you think the same as me? That's how we feel often offended, or I don't know what you feel, Philippa, but my feeling was, when I grew up, if people had a different opinion, you'd debate it, but that's okay. Then after a while, it was more like if they think differently, you dislike them. And now it seems like if someone's different, you hate them because they're different, and you feel it's actually not about them. It's about me because I feel threatened by those who are different from me. I think a really spiritual person can embrace every type of person that they come in touch with.
Some beautiful answers there. And it may have given rise in your mind to a question that you would like to ask Charlie, and we do have a little bit of time. So if you're watching this, obviously not if you're watching a recording of this, but if you're watching now and you'd like to ask a question, then do post it in the chat and we can put your questions to Charlie. But really, as you're speaking, Charlie, it's making me think that, you know, any one topic of spiritual discussion that we look at, you can't look at in isolation, because you need all the pieces of the jigsaw to make up the whole picture. And I'm thinking here about the practice of being the observer, the detached observer that you're talking about, the understanding of time and how things move through different phases. So therefore you have an acceptance of a situation or a person because you see them as on a journey through time. Or the law of karma, the law of cause and effect. All these spiritual teachings are important because they're all needed to enable us to arrive at this place of acceptance of myself first and foremost, absolutely, but acceptance of everything around me, which enables me to stay in this place of pure thinking and pure feeling. It is really a whole package of understandings that are needed to deliver what you're describing.
It is, Philippa, and it really is. Sometimes I think you can do spirituality as a hobby, you know, occasionally read a book or something. You can do it as a discipline. You meditate regularly, that's good. But I often find people who do that, as soon as they stop meditating, they switch off and switch back to the old perception of self and life, or it's a lifestyle. And I think that today what works is when I really, really try to practice these things because they actually work. And really the key for me, I feel in a sense, is my relationship with God, my relationship with the Supreme Soul gives me a strength to keep aiming for that quality of thinking, you know, so that when I'm in a situation and I'm challenged and a few old thoughts come, that sort of relationship sort of restores my awareness that actually I am responsible and I can create even good thoughts, even if someone doesn't have good thoughts for me or someone is criticizing me. I really feel disappointed when I fall back into my old stuff of generating the negative or weak thoughts. It's so easy to do. But deep down, I feel, no, that I can be better than that. And I get that strength to maintain through my relationship with God.
Well, we're getting a few comments coming in, people saying, thank you so much for sharing on this aspect of knowledge. You truly are a pure soul. You know, and I think that it is interesting that when you carry this quality of purity, it is visible for other people. It is something that they can see and that they recognize. And this touches on what we were talking about in our first session, that this quality of being, of purity, is actually innate in all of us. And therefore we do recognize it when we see it, and we are actually attracted to it. It's there within us.
It's so true, Philippa. You know why we're attracted to babies and little children? Because of relative purity. I wouldn't say total purity, but relative purity. And you know, my life experience tells me the most fundamentally important thing in human relationships is a pure attitude. When you have an attitude of seeing good in people, of holding their value in your attitude, you'll be successful. The reason that we don't get on with other people is because even in the back of my mind, I hold thoughts and feelings of what you've said, what you've done. in the past, and that mixture is felt by the other person. And, you know, we might say, well, it's almost impossible not to do that. But actually, you know, the more you sort of transform yourself and you choose to see what's good in other people, it is incredible the more positive response we get from others when we make the choice. Yes, I can see your weaknesses, I can see this, I can see that, but actually I'm going to choose to see what's valuable in you. It's unbelievable, the change and response we get from others. That to me is thoughts and feelings radiating through my attitude, and it can change an atmosphere, it can change a dynamic in a relationship, it can change a workplace atmosphere or a family atmosphere.
Another question that's come in is around, you know, what happens when events are so turbulent that they actually overwhelm us. And in that state of overwhelm, we lose our ability to have this discernment that you're talking about. And that experience can then trigger memories of other moments of distress or suffering. And before you know it, you're kind of back in that sort of hole. How do you deal with overwhelm and still maintain this attitude of purity?
Yes, I mean, the world throws up incredible situations for all of us. You know, very practically, we are different, but if there is someone in your life that maybe a spiritual person who you know is sort of a stable, if I feel I'm completely overwhelmed and I can't ground my thinking, if there's someone I can ring or meet that just their vibrations, their company just gives me a reality check that I've actually thought myself into this really weird place, which we do. We create our own reality in our mind. For me, I go back to absolutely intrinsic things. So if I feel my mind has gone a little bit into what overwhelm or whatever, I go back to the seed that I'm an eternal soul. And this is really what's important. This little scene of life is temporary. It's all things will pass. All things will pass. I sort of normalize my thinking, because what happens is you think yourself into all this anxiety and depression, and you think it's reality, but actually it's a reality in my head. So if you have the company of a really loving person, or if you give yourself company from your original self, or even if you take God's company, if that's something you would like to do, something I do, Phil, you know, for me, sometimes, if I can say, I sit down in front of God like a child and allow myself to be loved. And I just find that love just cools me down. It's amazing. That's what's important, actually. I've let something really blow up in my head, but actually it just cools me down. And then I start to see a more realistic picture.
A lovely little kind of idea there of this seed thought of, you know, I am an eternal soul, a being of peace. And you know, it's something that you can bring into any moment, that idea that I'm an eternal being of peace, and that can help bring us back to where we want to be. We're going to have a meditation in just a few moments. Let's just try and squeeze in one last question. Someone's saying we didn't quite resolve whether it's feelings that come first or thoughts. I think we might have to park that one for another time. But what is the role of the intellect in regulating these feelings? I think it's a good question, because we haven't talked about this discernment or this power of the intellect.
Well, just that first thing, actually, I think in psychology, it's an ongoing debate. Is it thoughts or feelings? There's no answer. What do they, you know, the old saying, is it the chicken or the egg? It's a similar sort of thing. You know, the intellect is really the vessel that holds truth. when my intellect is under the influence of my past actions, my karma, my subconscious, it's taken all over the place. It's like we dance to the tune of my old story. But when I feel in that vessel of truth who I am an eternal soul. Who do I belong to? I belong to God. And it's a natural relationship. It's not a religious belief. It's a natural, loving friendship, relationship with a pure soul. When I hold that in my intellect, the intellect has a power not to be overridden by emotion. So when that emotion just comes into you in a split second, when the intellect has done the work over time, it won't just bow down and just be bulldozed by the emotion. It will stand its ground, say, no, I don't want to go there. Now, this also takes practice, but actually, the more truth that sits in my intellect, I have an incredible power within me to not suppress my emotions, but understand where they come from and resolve them through wisdom and love and understanding rather than suppression and violence internally. And even not overreact to the self. Negative things will come, anger will come, but I'm learning about myself. I don't violently react to myself. I actually gently look at it and say, well, how do I want to do it differently next time? You know, it's not just in the journey of transformation, the whole process of how I treat myself, how I allow myself to transform, you know, the process is, you know, really important to be very gentle, very understanding, extremely kind to the self. And I think that's a challenge for most of us. We're used to beating up, to be really gentle and kind in this process of change.
Very much. So why don't we practice having some pure feelings towards ourselves and the relationship we have with our own inner being in a few moments of meditation to just bring our conversation to a conclusion. I think we've covered a huge amount of ground and you've given us so much to think about. So let's just settle into the experience of some of these ideas now. If you could just lead us with a few words as you bring us into a few moments of meditation.
And can I say, Philippa, on behalf of everyone, thank you for getting up at 1:30 in the morning for this. You look very bright, actually. So really,
well, it's such a pure time of the day, isn't it? So it's always
okay.
a privilege to experience and be up at this time. So a pleasure.
So I would like to invite everybody to put down your devices and any distractions. And just observe the most precious treasure of your life, your thoughts and your feelings, the whole quality of my life depends on the quality of my thoughts and feelings. In this life of learning about myself, I realize that each thought, each feeling is my creation. And to create the highest quality of thought and feeling, I first visualize myself as a minute spark of life energy sitting lightly in the center of the forehead. I, the eternal, immortal, non-physical self. The more I sow the seed of my true self, automatically pure thoughts and feelings emerge. It's a natural consequence of self-realization. And in this sweet state of soul consciousness, I open myself to the one relationship that's permanent, the lover of the soul, a radiant jewel of light, radiating a purity of love. Just gently rest your mind towards this image of light, radiating love. And feel this love enter the core of your being, soothing you, calming you. The more I experience this love, my self-respect grows, and my ability to create pure thoughts and feelings grows with it. We are at a time when it's so important to give time to the self. Give time to educate myself, to emerge pure thoughts and pure feelings and spread them in the atmosphere. This is really a beautiful life. Thank you so much.